I'm Jen or Jennifer, and I'm answering this question that I've posed: what is trauma-informed Gestalt therapy? So I'm Gestalt therapist, trauma-informed psychotherapist. So I guess I notice I'm really nervous standing here. I can feel the energy of nervousness right up around my chest. I can feel it, talking about feet, I can feel it in my legs and my feet. I'm just going to notice it's there. I welcome it. I'm here on Wednesdays and Mondays by appointment. I think to understand to start answering the question, I'm going to go back to energy. We've heard that a lot of people with Tanya, Celeste and Gary have all talked about energy. And so this answers what a Gestalt is. That's a German word meaning a form or a shape. And it's kind of when they talk about energy and the energy goes up and it goes down. You can think of it as a circle. I'm going to make it, I've actually got a little handout later, but I'll do this as long as my hands don't shake too much so you can see. So, if I've just stolen, thank you Tanya, I've stolen your pens here. So if I draw a line like this, and two lines like that, and we think that this is time, and we think of this as energy. So if we have something, okay, that could be helpful, thank you. A board, yeah, it won't flop so much. If we think of any sensation, any urge, any thought, like for example, is anyone feeling thirsty here?
A little tiny bit.
Little tiny bit. So I'm gathering you have a little bit of awareness, maybe a little tiny bit. So okay, so if we start down here, we have a kind of little awareness. There's a sensation here popping up, yeah? And coming up into, so I'll just draw the whole thing like this. This is the kind of arc of what we do with that sense of thirst. So the sensation comes up here, above this line here. Down here is where our nervous systems are at quite low energy, because this is energy, remember, and this is time. So we just have this move. I'm noticing I'm a little bit thirsty. And by now it's come into awareness. And you may or may not want to do something about that. In which case, mobilize, get up, and then you go somewhere to get some water, and then fill that cup up, and then final contact with, and then there's a sense of hopefully satisfaction. I've actually met that need. I can start to assimilate that, and then I can start to forget about it. I can withdraw. And these sorts of flows are going through our lives every moment, every second. Sometimes they're just a momentary thing. I've just got to adjust my chair, just got to adjust where I'm standing. I've just got to settle my nerves. Or it could be a lifetime. So we've got lots of these flows. Now what happens, Gestalt Therapy was developed in the 60s as a response to, it was kind of an early here and now therapy, looking at what happens when we don't have these sort of smooth kind of arcs, where it's difficult for us perhaps to even be aware of a sensation of thirst, or aware of a sensation of, even have the sensation, let alone get to awareness of thirst, tiredness, of a lot of our own needs. And so at each point we might have had to modify. We've been talking about blockages or resistances today. I like to think of modification, because this is where my trauma-informed lens comes in. Because this happens when we're in a safe environment. It's okay to connect with my feelings, my sensations. It's okay. But what if you're in an unsafe environment? The whole thing, you can feel a little kid in an unsafe environment. It's not safe for them to be in contact with their own needs. It's more important, it's more adaptive to notice what else is going on and to respond to that. And so, yeah. So, okay, I'll put that down. And so in adversity, we have this issue where a little child has this is in a situation where pretty early on in kids, and even babies can notice this, something's not right, something's not safe. And sometimes they modify what they do to make, sometimes they might notice if they smile a little bit more, the parents seem to have a little bit more energy. They notice that they can actually affect their environment. They can't, of course, they're only kids, you know, they can't do much, but then they learn new different kinds of modifications. Depending on the adversity, those modifications have to be more drastic. So what can happen is there can be a part of the child that maybe at age 6, 7, 8 takes themselves to school and doesn't know, it kind of splits off from what's going on at home. And that's a necessary and natural adaptation. So we talk about kind of a part of the self is that ordinary going on about everyday life self, and then these parts that hold what that child needs to do just to get by. So just going to have a little bit of water. My sensation, as you can see, I'm just got my Gestalt. And I'm still shaking. I always have this when I speak, because I notice that for me it's vulnerability. Being able to speak about what's important to me is vulnerability. And in my own experience, and I know what it's like, vulnerability isn't always safe. It's a wonderful thing to have, but vulnerability is not always safe. So I'm just noticing that and honouring that. So you heard from Celeste when she talked about fight flight. So I've got this lovely colour thing. All of those sort of survival responses are necessary adaptations we use when we need to, like when the situation is an emergency and we need to be able to do that. In terms of energy, like this kind of lovely sort of smooth shape of energy keeps us in what we call a window of tolerance. So any trauma-informed psychotherapist will talk about a window of tolerance. But sometimes you might know in your own experience, sometimes that energy needs to go really high. That's when you can be severely disabled or very elderly and you can fight off that attacker. You can lift a car off your child. Or conversely, really, really low levels of energy just to get by. So they're adaptations, but that's when a different part of what's called our vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve going down and through our body, right through our heart, through our lungs, through our intestines, that there's different modes that it switches into. So the sympathetic gets us the energy, or the parasympathetic, the really low level of energy. And there's another aspect of it, it's called the ventral vagal, which is the social human connection part, and that part in a safe environment, that's how mammals, humans learn to be able to have activation without it triggering it right up here like that. So it's, if you like, it's a vagus nerve exercise. So if you see little kids, puppies, kittens, play fighting and things are okay, that's they're exercising their nervous system in a safe context, but not every child has that opportunity. And that's an adaptation and necessary, because that kid, it's not safe for that kid to be vulnerable. It's not safe for that kid to be able to do that, because that kid has to survive till they can get through and do their own thing. So I do honour adaptations, and we have a lot of adaptations. We can have let's just start, the earliest adaptation we have is a cry for help. So if any of you have been a parent or aunt, uncle, or have kittens or something, when they make that noise, I need that, if that's connected that being is connected to you, they will stir, they will get you there to look after them. That's all a baby can do to get their needs met. They can cry. When any mammal is frightened, we freeze, because first of all we need to know what the hell's going on. Was that an okay noise, or is that an indication of something serious? And so there's a moment of orientation, and then we could freeze, and there's that deer in the headlights thing. You know, it's actually an adaptation. It's actually quite safe. Sometimes it's sometimes safer to not move. I've had an experience of, because in some of my other work with refugees, I've taught for over 30 years refugees and migrants. I've had a story where one of my students told me, being on a train station, she herself was from Palestine and of course has a long trauma history there, and she had her children in a pram, and she was standing next to another woman who had children in a pram, and something happened to the other pram. The pram started to move towards the train was coming, and the woman standing next to my student was frozen. She couldn't move. So the bystanders came and got the pram, and you know what they did? They rounded on that woman. How could you be standing there? Why didn't you move? What's wrong with you? What kind of mother are you? And that woman she has automatically gone into that survival response. That is a testament, that's a legacy of her own adaptation. And how terrible is that the community judge? And that's what happens to rape victims as well. How come you didn't kick off your attacker? So, because for her, being still maybe got her out of trouble. Maybe it stopped people attacking her. Maybe it stopped her even noticing she was there. So I heard that story and my heart was so sad, because that woman goes away and takes away that story of being like, I nearly killed my kids. It's really sad. And yet it's a necessary adaptation. Submit is one of the earliest adaptations to modifications, because if you're stuck, if you're a little kid, you've got dangerous caregivers, the safest thing to do is to do what they say, to be a good kid. So under here I've got all these little kinds of typical experiences people have now in their lives, such as could be feelings of depression or feelings of shame, being filled with self-hatred or passive, or being a good child. You know, being a good child is an amazing adaptation if you can work that one out. Maybe it gets you good grades at school, but it's also an adaptation because it's a child's right to be messy, noisy, to make mistakes, etc. So it's an interesting indication of a child's already being a good child. Impulses to take care of others, being self-sacrificing, because it works. So good on that kid. Good on that kid. Now, when children in adverse situations get a bit older, get a bit bigger, fight and flight become more effective. And so flight can be just running away, or it could actually be discovering substances at work to just stop the body, because the body remembers, as you've been hearing from the other wonderful practitioners here. So there are other ways to stop the body message coming through. Remember the beginning bit here, because sometimes the body message is help me, I need something, but that's too dangerous in a dangerous environment to feel that, so it's safer to push it away. And then of course fight, which can be anger, being judgmental, impulses to mistrust. And this is a real difficulty for a lot of us who look for help and look for support. Mistrust comes up. That's entirely natural. Self-destructiveness, being suicidal, all of these are actually, I don't know, it sounds counterintuitive, but being suicidal it's just an effort to help. It's a part of ourselves that say, hey, I've got an answer here. You don't have to keep suffering. So my work is to, like in my work with my clients, I do not require trust, because for people who have been in abusive, adversive situations, often their abusers will say, you can trust me. So it's very triggering. My work doesn't need anybody to trust me. You know, if someone wants to trust me, that's okay, but I don't need it, because what I'm hoping to do is facilitate a mindful, gentle internal dialogue between the parts of ourselves. Because this part, the part that gets us to school, the parts that can somehow do things and just go shopping or pay the bill or whatever it is that we can do, even in the most compromised client, there's usually something, even if it's a hope, that part can help to work with the other parts. And with respect, because these are all potential resources. When someone's been in adverse situations, we're all on a spectrum here. We're all on a spectrum of greater or lesser. This is my view of fragmentation, I suppose you could call it. So if we've been in adverse situations, often we've developed incredible skills which can be turned against us. So it's a question of starting to work with those parts and starting to work with and befriending those parts. And these strong parts, often destructive, often scary things, because what other people see is impulses to suicide, impulses to self-harm, eating disorder, experiences, all those sorts of experiences which freak other people out. They're just trying to help. So getting to know them, respect them, and to work with them is the work that I do. And depending on the person's experience, that could take quite a long time. Because depending on how much fragmentation, these little parts, if you've ever heard Gabor Mate or anybody who talks about trauma, they talk about these parts. These are not memory parts, these are impulses. These are stuck in trauma time. So they don't even know you're such a smart person. They don't know you're actually an adult. So it's quite an extraordinary thing, because there's still these little ones. They just had to do it all by themselves, and they've never actually had a sense of a caring adult. And in my work, I would be inviting you to be that caring adult. Yeah. Whew, I notice I still have my activation. It's part of my, because I'm aware there's a passion in me about this work. I very much believe in all these parts being welcome, none of these parts to be got rid of. And anger particularly, anger is a good thing. Anger, we can feel the energy of anger. Where do we notice that? In the spine maybe. I mean, it gives us the energy, it gives me the energy. If I can stand here and feel the energy, I'm not feeling anger at all. I can own that. I'm feeling a kind of... In Gestalt Therapy, we talk about anxiety as being excitement without support. So I can feel the floor here. I need the support. I've just finished that. Time for you to talk. Any questions?
I think that was so interesting because, anxiety without support, and then you were moving with your, body, and it's kind of like getting trust in the physical body too, that it can support you.
That is absolutely true. In my Gestalt training, it was very much working with the body. I've started moving much more into this stabilization treatment, because a lot of people I work with, even the body is triggering. So going to the body is hard.